Snow Angels by Harriet Loveday. Retreat, recharge, relove. Lucille stood in front of the charming wooden A-frame lodge and exhaled. The guide who had accompanied her on his snowmobile turned off his engine and similarly took a look at the deep golden wooden lodge covered in snow, nestled amongst green, spiky, snow-covered pine trees. He then looked over at his guest. Far from the first flushes of youth, she was well presented and clearly took care of herself. She had short, styled, honey blonde hair and enchanting grey eyes topped by thick false lashes. Her brow also seemed surprisingly smooth compared to her neck, and she wore expensive cashmeres and faux furs. From her emanated a distinctive chocolate-vanilla-smelling perfume. He was used to the look and smell of money. The lady was of average height, slim and toned. She was similar to one of 100 women that he'd escorted here over the years. But the fact that she was here for Christmas and was planning to spend it alone meant that there was some sadness working its way through. He shrugged. Most people came here to get lost and find themselves again. Some stayed lost even when they returned home. None of his business. Addressing her, the guide asked, "Do you want me to unlock the lodge and take the bags in?" Drawing her eyes away from the perfectly charming wooden lodge, Lucille smiled gratefully at the guide. "Thank you so much. That would be wonderful," she said. Unpacking her bags and lifting the packages of food shopping off the snowmobile sled, the guide directed Lucille to the lodge and showed her how to unlock the door. "I'll just be 5 minutes bringing this in, and then I'll light the fire for you," he said. "Oh, no rush," Lucille graciously replied. "It seems quite warm in here." "Yes, that's from our site-generated renewable energy, which is stored in batteries and powering the underfloor heating. We also have generators for backup. There are solar panels and wind turbines further up the valley. You've probably seen already on the website, but it's always nice to have a cosy fire too. You will find the lodge has been built with the highest eco-certifications and eco-friendly insulation. It'll be quite warm, but as I said earlier, I'm on call. Any problems, just call my mobile," the guide concluded. "Thank you," Lucille said again. She unwound her scarf and started to wander around the lodge retreat where she would be spending the next 2 weeks. She'd wanted to get away from it all, and here she really would. No cheating men, no gold-digging women, just her and her thoughts. She even thought about trying to write some poetry, but it had been so long. The family had been a little upset about her wanting to spend Christmas alone, but after everything that happened, she really needed time out to put herself first and think about what she wanted and where she was going. Once the guide had finished taking her bags upstairs and unpacking the food away in the open-plan kitchen, he showed Lucille around. The downstairs was a large open-plan area, the living room at the front of the lodge, and the open dining area and kitchen to the back. Between the living area and the dining area was a large dual-aspect modern wood burner, large enough to warm the entire downstairs space. Soft beige velvet sofas in the living area were generously covered with white faux fur throws, in complement to the little faux sheepskin throws that were placed over the rustic wooden benches either side of the rustic wooden table in the dining area. The kitchen was made from the same rich wood that was used to construct the lodge. From both the front and the back of the lodge, large triple-glazed floor-to-ceiling windows looked out onto the snow-covered landscape all around. From the back windows, in the distance, Lucille could just about make out another A-frame lodge. It was clearly part of this small holiday hamlet, but it was far enough away not to bother her. She could also see, on the decking behind the lodge, a hot tub adorned with fairy lights. At the side of the open-plan area, and rising up over the kitchen, some open-stepped wooden stairs took Lucille upstairs to the bedroom. There was a large king-size bed covered with an intricate red and white handmade patchwork counterpane. The upstairs space also had views to the front and back of the lodge. Over the stairs, a large bathroom area was panelled off. It contained a jacuzzi bath, sauna, and 2 sparkling marble sinks perched on top of a wooden cupboard. Every aspect of the lodge was warm and welcoming. Lucille let out a deep sigh as she felt herself start to unwind. This was just what she needed. The guide instructed her that the wood for the fire was stored to the side of the house, but either he or the cleaners would be in daily to bring it in for her. He handed her the lodge keys and said, "I'll be back tomorrow morning to top up the wood in the baskets downstairs. If you change your mind about doing your own cooking, we do have a chef available to cook meals." "Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. No, I think I'd like to cook for myself and just take time out alone. But thank you, though. I appreciate it, Lucille replied. No problem. The cleaners are in daily between approximately 9 and 10 a.m. They have a spare key, so don't worry if you're out and about. Text me if there's anything specific that you need, he said. Lucille smiled her thanks and saw the helpful guide out. She watched as he pushed her snowmobile up to the house and, waving, was off, whizzing down the slopes, no doubt to settle in another visitor in one of the other 9 lodges dotted around the area. Not that you'd know. Apart from the lodge just visible behind this one, she hadn't seen any of the other lodges when she came up the hill. Lucille warmed herself in front of the fire while sipping a large glass of red wine. She read the welcome pack and looked at the mapped paths for some of the suggested walks around the area. She also had the snowmobile if she wanted to go a little further. But this evening she just wanted to unwind, have a bath, and try to forget about the last few weeks. Lucille slept in late the next morning and was still in her faux fur onesie, drinking a coffee machine tab cappuccino and looking out at the view when the cleaners arrived. The guide had already been in while she'd been having her lie-in to top up the firewood. It was a lazy start to the day, but it had been bliss not to rush. After the cleaners left, Lucille decided to do some gentle yoga on the mat in front of the fire. She'd just finished her practice when, to her horror, she saw a man with a camera taking pictures of her from outside the lodge. Swearing, Lucille rushed upstairs and peered out at him from behind some furniture. There he was again, in front of the lodge, as bold as brass. Snap, snap, snap. The man was well wrapped up against the cold in his padded snow jacket and trousers. From under his red wool hat she could see his shoulder-length dark brown hair with a slight wave. He held a very posh-looking camera. The man couldn't be more than 30. Lucille watched as he circled around the lodge and back to where he took a few more pictures. Finishing up and putting his camera away, he made a beeline for the lodge in the distance behind hers. Lucille was quite shaken up and dithered for a moment, deciding what to do. Should she call the guide and report it? Should she ignore it? No, she resolved. She'd had enough of being dependent on men and letting men scare her into ignoring their bad behaviour. No, she wasn't having this. She wasn't going to have her retreat spoiled by him or anyone else. She needed clear boundaries, and taking photos of her wasn't okay. She would go right up to the other lodge now and sort this out. Running high on adrenaline, Lucille hastily dressed for the cold and snow outside, and stomping with anger, she retraced the man's footprints in the snow up to his lodge. It was a bit further to walk than she realised. It was also hard work stomping up through the snow. By the time she reached the lodge, she was a little tired physically, but her anger drove her on. She stood panting in front of the wooden lodge. It was an exact replica of the one she was staying in. Bang, bang, bang! Lucille hammered on the lodge door. She thought she heard the man moving around inside, and she prepared herself for what she would say. If he got nasty, then, well, maybe she'd have to get a little nasty too. The door slowly opened, and a kind-looking pair of blue eyes looked out, framed by a tanned face, a neatly trimmed dark brown beard, and a head of wavy dark brown hair, which fell to the man's shoulders. He looked about 30. He was wearing a thick, red-checked brush cotton shirt, jeans, and thick green woolen socks. He was about 6 feet tall. In his hand he held a cereal bowl and appeared to be partway through his morning snack. "Hello?" the man said uncertainly. "Can I help you?" Suddenly Lucille's anger started to evaporate. He seemed quite nice. He didn't really look like a stalker. Still, Lucille needed to set some boundaries. Bluntly, she said, "Stop taking photos of me." The man nearly choked on his cereal. "I'm sorry," he said. "I said, stop taking photos of me." "But I haven't been," the man protested. Lucille started to feel rather uncertain of herself. He seemed quite sure. Perhaps it was another man. But there was no one else around, and this looked like the man she'd seen from the upstairs window. Lucille continued, "I watched you not more than 20 minutes ago outside my lodge taking photos of me through the windows." The man protested his innocence. "Honestly, I wasn't taking photos of you. I was taking photos of the lodges. It's my job. I can't take photos of you through the windows anyway, as it's special glass. See?" He pointed to the huge windows crammed into the apex of his lodge. "Look," he said, pointing. "Can you see in?" Lucille realised she couldn't and started to feel like she'd made a very embarrassing mistake. The man continued, "Right, but check this out." Grabbing Lucille by the hand, he pulled her through into the lodge to see the reality on the other side. The lodge had the same layout as the one she was staying in, but what a difference. It was a mess. On the table sat a camera with associated accessories. Some discarded clothing was laying on the sofa, and there appeared to be a plate with the remains of last night's dinner still stuck to it. Didn't the cleaners visit here? She certainly hadn't seen all this through the window. "Oh," Lucille said. She shook her gloved hand free from his. "You see," the guy said, "I wasn't looking at you or taking photos of you because I couldn't see you. As I said, I was taking photos of the lodge." Lucille turned to look at him quizzically. "What is it exactly that you do?" she asked. Proudly, the man replied, "I'm an influencer. I take photos of remote locations, a sort of wish-you-were-here idea. I can show you my Instagram and Facebook pages." Before Lucille could protest, he placed his bowl on the coffee table, closed the door, whipped his phone out of his back pocket and started scrolling through the pages and pages of beautiful photos. He was close enough that she could smell his fresh pine shower gel scent. Lucille tried not to think about it. There were pictures of woodlands, forest retreats, campfires, people canoeing, outdoor parties of people under fairy lights. It looked lovely, and the photos were rather good. Lucille flicked a look at the man's camera on the table. It seemed like she'd made a terrible mistake. Blushing deep red, Lucille said, "I'm so terribly sorry. I didn't realise. I thought you were taking pictures of me. I hate it when... That is, it's been... Well, I've been through..." The kind man stopped scrolling through his phone and placed his hand on her arm. "Hey, it's okay. I'm made of tougher stuff than getting flustered by a feisty female." Lucille blushed even harder. The man continued, "My name's Oliver. What's yours?" He held out his hand. Lucille took off her glove and placed her hand inside his. "I'm Lucille," she said quietly. Honestly, she just wished the ground would eat her up. She was so embarrassed. "Would you like to stay for a coffee or have something now that you're here? Have a chat?" Oliver asked. Part of Lucille did want to talk to someone about everything that had happened to her the past few weeks, but not to this guy, and not after what had just happened in the way that she behaved. Lucille just wanted to get out of here as soon as possible and bury her face in a pillow. Lucille replied, "Thank you. No, I've got something I need to get back to." Outside the window, the trees swayed gently in the morning breeze, and a calm stillness settled over the valley. That is something I'm doing. I've got to go." "What is it that you're doing?" Oliver asked. Lucille said the first thing that came into her head. "Poetry. I'm in the middle of a poem. I need to get back to it." "Poetry? That's cool. I'd love to hear some of your poems sometime. That is, if you're not still mad at me." "Not mad. So sorry. My mistake. Got to go." Lucille hastily pulled her gloves back on and turned for the door. Touching her on the arm again, Oliver said, "Hey, perhaps you'd like to do dinner sometime. I cook a great steak, and we are neighbours for a short while. It's nearly Christmas." Lucille smiled politely, thinking of the mess on the coffee table and wondering exactly what state the kitchen would be in. Graciously, she said, "Oh yes, absolutely, I'd love that. Right, got to go. Bye." Releasing the door handle, she rushed out of the front door, desperate to get back to her lodge and away from this cringe-worthy situation. By the time evening came round, Lucille found she'd almost got over her embarrassment and was almost able to look back at the incident this morning and laugh. Almost. Lucille decided that she needed to unwind and chill out, so she turned the outside hot tub on, changed into her bikini, wrapped herself in a very thick dressing gown, and with her glass of champagne tightly in her hand, slipped into the lovely hot water. The hot tub on the deck was surrounded by fairy lights, stars, and gently swaying trees. This was bliss and just what she needed. Lucille rested back in the warm, bubbling water. She could feel all her stress and cares drifting away. She felt lighter and happier, almost as if she was beginning to connect to the girl she used to be, the carefree romantic, the girl that existed before her traumas of lies, cheating, and broken hearts. Although the last few weeks had been awful, they hadn't been entirely unexpected. In truth, she'd been in a bad situation for a long time. She had the perspective now to see that. Lucille wanted to reconnect to the Lucille before, who she really was. She used to sing all the time when she was younger. She hadn't sung for years. Lucille tried to remember some of the love songs she used to sing with her mum in the kitchen when they were growing up. Lucille sipped her champagne under the starlit sky and started to sing to herself. A voice came out from the darkness beyond her decking. "Hey, great voice!" Lucille swore, turned around, and placed her hand over her chest. Oliver came up a few steps up the decking area into the light. "Hot tub, great idea. That looks nice." Lucille did a double take. Was he asking to come in? She tried to rein herself in. She'd already embarrassed herself by being indignant before him. She didn't want to dig herself in deeper. Thanks, Lucille said uncertainly as she dipped her body further down into the water. Oliver seemed to hesitate. Well, I'll let you get back to it then. He was just about to turn to walk back down the steps when he lifted his camera into the air and said, "Just so you know, I wasn't taking photos of you." He looked wistfully up to Lucille in the hot tub, although I think that would be a great photo, by the way. He turned away and started to walk down the steps as he called back to her from the darkness beyond. "By the way, dinner at mine tomorrow, 7 p.m. Don't be late. Hope you like steak." And he was gone. Lucille sat in the warm water, stunned, clutching her half-full glass of champagne. He hadn't even waited for her to say yes. He'd just assumed. Lucille stood in front of the wardrobe in the bright morning light and wondered what to wear. She did have 2 wool jumper dresses, but she'd be walking between lodges and getting wet, cold legs wasn't clever. It would have to be jeans and a jumper. If she did the white jeans with the thick knit cream Bardot-style jumper and her diamond drop earrings, then that could still look classy for dinner. With her outfit for the evening decided, Lucille relaxed by the fire, painted her nails, and got herself another machine tab cappuccino and considered her next problem. Lucille had told Oliver yesterday that she was a poet, that she wrote poetry. Well, yes, she did a long time ago, but she hadn't written any in years, and from the little that she knew of this man, he would almost certainly ask her to read some to him. Snuggling up in her faux fur onesie in front of the fire and overlooking the beautiful views from the living room window, Lucille picked up a new pale green moleskin-covered notebook and sleek Parker pen and started to write. She'd need at least 5 or 6 poems by tonight if she wasn't going to look completely ridiculous again. At 7 p.m. sharp, Lucille knocked on Oliver's lodge door. She felt silly. She hardly even knew the guy, but she did feel like she owed him an apology, and at least this seemed to be going a little way towards that. Although she did feel a bit self-conscious that he'd seen her in her bikini in the hot tub yesterday. She was older than him by at least 10 years, she guessed. He said he hadn't looked, hadn't he? Lucille's thoughts whirred and whirred as Oliver pulled open the door. Oliver's hair was slightly dishevelled. He wore another check shirt, this time blue, again blue jeans. He had a tea towel thrown over his shoulder and a cooking spatula in his hand. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing his muscly arms. "Hi, Lucille," Oliver said with a big wide smile. "Come in." He ushered her through to the living room with a guiding arm behind her back. "Here," he said, putting down the spatula and the tea towel briefly onto the surface. "Let me help you with your things." Oliver helped Lucille out of her snow jacket and hung up her jacket, snow trousers, hat and scarf. Then she handed him a bottle of red. Oliver took it from her with exaggerated graciousness and, holding it back, looked at the label. Shiraz, one of my favourite vineyards. This will go perfectly with the steak." He flashed her a thank you with his big, wide smile. Flicking the tea towel back over his shoulder and grabbing the wine and spatula in one hand, Oliver took Lucille's hand and enthusiastically led her through to the kitchen. The layout was just the same as Lucille's lodge. The lodge decor was also very similar, just a few different accent colours in the cushions here and there, and different panoramic pictures on the walls. The kitchen was a bit of a mess. Perhaps the cleaners didn't come often. Oliver flipped the chips and started another pan warming for the steak. Next, he opened the bottle of red that Lucille had just bought and poured out a little into glasses while the open bottle aired. Handing Lucille a glass of wine, Oliver clinked the glass against hers and said, "Here's to Christmas company." He looked happily at her and watched her over the wine glasses. Lucille repeated his toast and sipped the wine too. From behind them she could hear the steaks starting to sizzle and her tummy made little grumbly noises. Oliver winked at her. By the time they'd got to dessert, which was a lovely panna cotta that Oliver had somehow found time to make, Lucille and Oliver had covered most subjects except age, politics and past relationships, and they were already on to their second bottle of red. Oliver suggested they adjourn to the living room. While Oliver tended the fire, Lucille cosied up on the large L-shaped sofa and watched him. Oliver wandered over to her and sat down. Reaching behind him, he pulled a faux fur blanket towards him and offered it to her in case she was cold. She declined. Topping up their glasses of red, he said, "So, you told me you wrote poetry. Would you recite a piece for me?" Lucille knew this was going to come up and she was prepared. Trying not to feel embarrassed, she tried out one of her attempts from today on the proviso that he understood that she was just playing with the words and it wasn't really finished. Lucille continued, "It's inspired by this retreat, really. I need to recharge and come back to me again." With sensitive eyes, Oliver nodded as if he understood completely. He sat quietly as she slowly recited. "Fire in the snow, burning my heart. I heal and grow. Fears depart. Cut off my pain. Wash me anew. Cleanse me again, so I can love you." The space was warm and silent. Lucille could hear the fire crackling in the wood burner. Oliver looked at her with a mixture of what appeared to be admiration and affection. His eyes were soft. Slowly, he placed his glass down on the coffee table, reached over to take Lucille's glass and placed it next to his. Then, turning back to her, he leant slowly forward over her, ran his hand gently along the side of her face, and kissed her softly on the mouth. Lucille responded in kind. Her logic was screaming at her. "What? Are you nuts? You just met this guy. He might have a girlfriend. He might be a serial killer." Whereas the rest of her body was crying out for him and his body screaming, "Oh, this feels great. This guy is gorgeous. You're a modern woman. Do what you want. Wow." Their kissing became more intense as Oliver pushed her back onto the sofa, whispering, "Seriously, there is something about you. From when you were first angry at me, I am really, really attracted to you." It was about this time that the wine, the fire, and the hunger for Oliver's body got the better of Lucille, and she started ripping his shirt off. By the time his muscly torso was holding her clothed body to him, there was no going back. It was inevitable. Lucille woke to a slightly sore head and the smell of fresh coffee as Oliver jumped back into bed beside her. "Morning, gorgeous," he said as he slid his hand over her naked body under the covers. Lucille could feel herself responding, and the events of the evening before came flooding back to her, only this time sobriety won out. She pushed his hand back and said, "No, I can't. I don't know what I was thinking last night. I shouldn't have slept with you. It's my fault. I'm sorry." Lucille tried to sit up slightly and pulled the pillow up behind her while clutching at the covers to try and retain a little modesty. Reaching her slim-toned arm out to the bedside table, she gratefully sipped her coffee. "Thank you for the coffee, by the way." Oliver looked completely relaxed as he lay against his pillow, smiling at her. Eventually he said, "I dare you to deny our chemistry is through the roof." Lucille blushed and tried to look away as she took another sip of coffee. Oliver reached over to her, removed the coffee cup from her hand and placed it on the bedside table. He straddled her over the covers and said, "Tell me you don't want me right now as much as I want you." Lucille could barely look at him and his naked torso just inches from her body. This was crazy. Last night had been crazy. What was she doing? Was this just some kind of holiday fling? 2 weeks of Oliver and then back to her broken life. Should she just enjoy this for what it was and try not to think about it too much? Oliver leant down to her ear and whispered, "Every part of my body wants to touch you." Slowly she turned her head and their mouths connected in a deep, passionate kiss. Lucille dragged herself out of bed. "I've got to go. I can't just spend 2 weeks in bed with you. This is too much. I'm supposed to be healing. I'm supposed to be sorting stuff out." Oliver watched her sadly as she got dressed. Eventually he said, "Can I see you tonight?" "No, I don't know. I need to think about this. I shouldn't have slept with you. Lots. It's not a good idea." Oliver smiled his big wild smile. "It was a great idea. Lucille shot him an angry look. Oliver said sadly, "Well, I still want you, even if you don't want me." Lucille felt mean. She came over to Oliver's side of the bed and allowed herself to briefly touch his hand. "I'm in a bad place. I don't want to create a mess or make things more complicated. I don't know what I want." Oliver looked into her eyes and entwined his fingers through hers as he said, "Whatever you need me to be, I can be that." Lucille smiled gratefully and let go of his hand, saying, "Besides, the cleaners will be here soon. I don't want them to gossip." "No, they won't. I only have them in twice a week. I don't want to add to their work, and I don't need to be pampered. I can take care of myself." Lucille wanted to laugh. He lived in permanent chaos, but she didn't want to be rude, so she said nothing. Smiling goodbye, she descended the stairs and let herself out. By the time Lucille got back to her lodge, she found the cleaners had been and the firewood was freshly stacked. Going upstairs, she ran a hot shower and stood under the soothing hot water. Internally, she was shouting at herself, "What are you doing? Are you crazy?" The problem was, she'd just experienced the best lovemaking of her life ever, and every part of her wanted to rush back up there and do it all over again. Experience told her this was going to end in trouble. Lucille didn't call Oliver as he'd asked. He'd sent her some photos throughout the day of some of the beautiful views he'd captured. They were incredible pictures. He really was talented. But she didn't reply. In fact, she spent the whole day trying not to think about him and therefore not able to do much else. As evening drew in, Lucille decided to put the hot tub on, open a bottle of champagne and try to bubble all her worries, stress and anxiety away. Lucille sat in the warm water, sipping her champagne, counting the fairy lights and trying to think about things and sort stuff out. But the only thought that kept coming back to her was Oliver, specifically his body touching her. "Hello," Oliver said from the bottom of the decking steps. "You didn't reply to my messages. Did you see the photos?" Lucille popped her head over the edge of the bubbling hot tub. "Why do you want me, Oliver?" she asked. Oliver shrugged as he walked up the steps to the decking. "I don't really know," he replied. "It's a body thing, I guess. Every part of me wants to be touching every part of you. But it's a bit more than that. I don't want to hurt you. I do want to make you happy. I don't really know why. I'm trying not to think about it, just live in the moment. That's what I do. But I'm older than you. I don't care. I have completely different life from you. We're not compatible." Oliver stood by the hot tub, looking softly down into Lucille's imploring grey eyes and swallowed. "I know I lead a crazy life, always travelling here and there, but I've seen a lot and I've learnt a lot, so don't just see me as some young stud who doesn't know what they're doing." I didn't mean it like that. But do you know what you're doing?" "Well, I know exactly what I'm about to do." With that, Oliver started undressing on the decking. "Oliver," Lucille hissed, "someone will see." "1, I don't care. 2, we really need to go for a walk tomorrow so you can see that the other lodges are quite a distance away. Besides, I can't help it." Oliver slipped into the hot water and made his way over to Lucille. She passed him her glass of champagne and he took a sip before handing it back to her to finish the glass and put it on the side. Moving his hands back under the water, he ran them over her body and she shivered with anticipation. Their mouths passionately connected under the light of the stars surrounded by the snow. 1 week had nearly passed already. Lucille and Oliver had been out on walks and she'd watched him take photos while she wrote poetry in her little notebook. She'd almost half filled her notebook with words and musings, crossed out lines and reworked sentences. All these years she hadn't written a thing. She thought she'd forgotten how. Her poetry probably wasn't very good, but it was the practicing that made it better, like toning a muscle. Oliver said it was great, but he would. Lucille was rose-tinted everything to him. Lucille and Oliver were inseparable, so it wasn't even a question that they would spend Christmas Day and New Year's Eve together. Lucille warned him that she was leaving on the 2nd of January. Oliver said that it was okay, but she got the feeling that it wasn't. Oliver kept asking her about her life back home, what she did, where she lived, when he might be able to see her again. Lucille lay in his arms in the lodge, in front of the fire, and told him about her life. "I'm 45. I had my son at 17 and my daughter at 18. Colin, my son, is engaged, and Stacey, my daughter, lives with her girlfriend. My husband and I run a chain of boutiques. Well, we did, until I found out about his multiple affairs with shop manageresses who were trying to sleep their way up the ladder. So I left, just a few weeks ago. It wasn't a happy marriage for quite a while. Yes, it hurt, but strangely, I now feel free. And then you found me, Oliver said hopefully. No, I shouldn't be jumping from one relationship to the next. I need time for reflection, Lucille said. What, 10 years and then you'll want me? That doesn't make sense and you know it. Oliver was annoyed. Lucille lay in the crook of Oliver's arm, looking at the flames dancing in the wood burner. Finally, she answered, You don't make sense to me. I don't know how this happened. Then how did we end up like this? Oliver asked her and squeezed her body closer to his. Because I stopped thinking and let my body take over, Lucille guessed. What actually happened is you smelt me, and somewhere in your animal instincts you read my DNA, and you know that I'm the one for you, Oliver said. Lucille tried to find a logical argument to push back against what Oliver was saying. The problem was he was right. On a primal level, her body had picked him. Lucille's thoughts whirred and whirred around her head. She desperately needed to work out why she wanted Oliver so very much, and she only had a week to do so. Christmas Day was bliss. Oliver brought a tiny tinsel tree that he'd folded up in his large travelling rucksack over to Lucille's lodge, and together they played Christmas songs, ate turkey, and danced to music while sipping large glasses of wine and later champagne. In the evening, they snuggled up in front of the fire and talked and cuddled. Eventually, they couldn't restrain their bodies any more. Oliver led Lucille by the hand up the stairs to her bedroom, where he undressed her, and they tenderly made love. New Year's Eve was a repeat of the quiet bliss of Christmas Day, except Oliver insisted that they see the new year in under the stars. Oliver had found a quiet spot not too far from the cabins. The clearing in the trees had a view out over the valley, and they could see the earth magic of the new year laid out before them. The view was of a huge snow-covered valley surrounded by snow-covered mountains and sprinkled with green pine trees and swathes of pine woodlands. The snow glowed white in the light of the moon and the stars. It almost seemed to Lucille that the snow sparkled in the half-light. The breeze lightly touched the trees, and she could hear owls in the distance calling and hooting to each other. Snuggled up under the wind-cheater blanket and cosy in their multiple layers of ski jackets, trousers and woolly hats, they toasted in the new year with some champagne. A shooting star zipped across the sky. Oliver looked down at Lucille and said, You have to make a wish. Lucille screwed her eyes up tight and wished hard. Oliver watched her every movement with tender eyes. Then he screwed up his eyes and said, I wish for... No, Lucille said, don't tell me or it won't come true. Gratefully, Oliver smiled at Lucille, and screwing up his eyes again, he made his secret wish. It was the night of the 1st of January, their last night together before Lucille left. Oliver was due to leave a few days after her. Lucille and Oliver sat snuggled up on the sofa of her lodge, watching the fire, their favourite place to be. You really have the most extraordinary job, Lucille commented. So people just let you stay in places like this as long as you promote it? All you have to do is take photos and add them to your accounts. People ask you to stay for free? And she shook her head in wonder. Oliver just shrugged. Yes, I guess for me it seems normal. That's what I do for a living. Sometimes I'll do collections of my photos. I've published 2 books of my photographs. I have a great life. It suits me. Oliver pulled Lucille a little tighter to him as they both sat watching the fire. He asked, Why don't you join me? What? Lucille turned around to look at him. Come with me on my adventures. We could have a base wherever you want, but we'd be travelling a lot. Take your notebook or your laptop. Write your poetry. Come with me. Oliver linked his fingers through hers and looked down into her beautiful grey eyes. I'm serious, Lucille. I mean it. Don't go. Come with me. Lucille started to think about her family, her friends, her messed up, fractured life, her forthcoming divorce. She should probably sort out that mess before she moved on to something else. Her mind whirred and whirred. What should she do? This was crazy. Was it possible she could live this life? Oliver looked at her with tenderness in his eyes. You know, You make much better decisions when you stop thinking and just go with your gut. He leant forward and softly kissed Lucille. His lips were as gentle as the breeze and as delicious as honey. Lucille never wanted it to stop. Pulling back a little from him, with love-hazed eyes, she replied, "Okay then." And they wrapped their arms around each other in a passionate lover's embrace.